At some point, the math is the math.
I think we can do a better job using that information.
It reinforces my belief that I have the best constituents. Hello, Austin. Hello, District 6. Hello, all of you watching the show. Welcome to another episode 26. Every time we do these during this crisis, it seems like I don't even know where to begin with all of the crazy nonsense that has occurred in the last week. I don't know if y'all are feeling that same way. It just seems like every day is a year or a minute. It's hard to keep track. The governor's orders coming out, I think, have been really confusing for a lot of folks. Are the businesses going to be open? Are they going to be closed? We're seeing a lot of confusion there. The city council is working really hard. The counties are now starting to step up and create some support programs. I mean, there's just a lot going on. And I'm hearing from a lot of folks in the community too about the challenges that they're experiencing and their concerns, and we're just trying to go as fast as we can, but also be smart about it. We've got some great guests on the show today. I'm really excited to talk to Amy Weir and Gloria Gonzales Dholakia from the Round Rock and Leander school boards, respectively, talk about what's happening in the schools. We have Loulou, whose last name is probably going to make me stumble 1,000 times over. Ghelichkhani. We'll ask her when she comes on if I said that correctly. Who's got an unbelievable music career, and she's got some really great music for us. And then Dr. Pritesh Gandhi, who is a candidate for Congress, but also is playing a pretty significant role in the community's public health crisis right now. I want to start. The mayor does this. He does a kind of a short show on Facebook. I want to bring up the chart. This is the dashboard that the city and Travis County put together that tracks cases, deaths, hospitalizations, and you can see the number of confirmed infections there in the lower left-hand corner. And if I'm really clever, I can make that go bigger. And this chart is still going up. It's still going up, and yet the governor has decided that we should start reopening businesses. It seems pretty clear to me that we don't have a handle on this yet. We got some great news at the city council earlier this week from many of our public health professionals that showed we were really starting to stem the tide. We had succeeded in, as a community, and credit to everyone in the community for taking this seriously and staying home and doing everything you could. We were reaching that level of social distancing that was allowing us to really get a handle on this, and it's really exciting. But now with the governor's orders, I'm not sure what's going to happen. I don't think any of us know what's going to happen. That is the challenge that we face right now as a community. Of course, the governor's orders are specific in some ways and general in others. It specifically overrides local orders. So, that's not great, because as the governor said at one point, all of our communities are different, and we should be able to adjust to those different needs. But the governor has changed his mind on that. So now businesses can be allowed to open, but only at 25% occupancy. When I talk to business owners, they're pretty concerned about how that even works and whether or not that's gonna even fly. The city continues to work on how to support the community. You've done a bunch of programs over the last couple of weeks. Started with my item that I passed, almost 5 weeks ago, directing the staff to start rolling out programs. There was the programs that some of my colleagues brought together, the RISE program. There was a music fund program, some bridge loan programs. There's a lot more coming onto the council agenda next Thursday. My item 23, that I've been working on with Councilmember Alter and Harper Madison and Ellis, is going to do a couple of things that will rapidly expand the business support programs for our local and small businesses, including some grant dollars for costs related to keeping our employees and our customers safe during this crisis, some money for childcare, and some money for our nonprofits, which were not included in earlier small business support programs. But we all know our nonprofits are key components to our communities, and we want to make sure that they're able to survive. Not only are they key components to the community, but to the economy. Partly one of the reasons that I bring music on is that this is both our values and our economics. We have to be able to solve all these problems at the same time. But it's tough, y'all. It's tough. City announced another program, a rental assistance program today. You can find that austintexas.gov/rent. And but it's not perfect. It's going to be a temporary program. It's not necessarily going to help everyone who needs it. But we are trying to move as quickly and rapidly as we can through this crisis. My hair is looking completely. I mean, look at this. I mean, I haven't done the haircut thing yet. My boyfriend Zach went out and got the haircutting stuff, but I don't know. We're both kind of pretending that the other one is going to ask first, and we just haven't done it yet. I think I got to. I mean, right? Ridiculous. All right, that's enough of that. Let's bring on our first couple of guests. We've had some pretty significant issues related to our schools, and the fact that the governor is telling businesses that they can reopen, but the schools are remaining closed, is going to cause a lot of problems for our working parents. So much going on, and frankly, as a city council member, I get to work on a lot of things, but schools are like the one thing I don't have to work on. So I'm really happy to bring on two amazing women who I get to work with, Amy Weir and Gloria Gonzales. Amy is the president of the Round Rock School Board, and Gloria is on the board of trustees for Leander ISD. Hello.
Hi. Hello. How are you?
Thanks for joining the show. First off, I just want to ask how you are handling this, how your families are doing during this crisis. Amy, why don't you start?
Everyone's alive. It's been tough. I will say, as a parent, it's been very hard. I've got 4 of my 5 kids are home. I've got 1 college, 2 high school, and a middle school, and we have to decide who's got internet priority at some times of the day, and it's a challenge to try to work, to try to do the school board, and try to help all the kids get all their stuff done.
And Gloria, how are you? I mean, your son Julian has been a real help supporting the show, but you've got a whole crew holed up there in River Place.
Yeah, and much like Amy, I have a house full of kids. I have a middle school and 2 high school, and my oldest is a senior. And I think it brings to light that every child, every student is different. Julian has, he's helping District 6 and helping with the show, and he's enjoying doing all those types of projects. My oldest, he's a senior. He's missing out on a lot of those senior events. And my youngest is trying to manage all of the online components. And I have a full-time job, and my husband has a full-time job. So like Amy said, trying to balance who's using the bandwidth at this point in time, and trying to juggle taking care of our school district as best I can, and taking care of the little people in my own house as well.
That's I don't have kids, and so I can only imagine how challenging that must be. My chief of staff, Marty Beyer, has young kids, and so she's also having to play the role of teacher during this whole process. But I am kind of interested in that, both the role that the school board's members are playing during this time, and I mean, what was happening as you were hearing from teachers and school administrators and the public that informed your decisions. Amy, you want to start?
Sure. Well, actually, we started with our emergency, where we gave a lot of more power to the superintendent, because things were changing so rapidly, and trying to get a school board quorum and a meeting. Day-to-day operations are for the superintendent and his team. And so we've really, in a sense, tried to leave it to the professionals as much as possible to get things up and running with the area superintendents, with the teachers, the principals. And they've done, it's been hard to turn everything on a dime to go from the classroom to online. And it has been a real challenge. We really just last night started getting into a lot of the nitty gritty with what the administration is doing. Budget is going to be coming up. That's going to be the bigger point. And Gloria's nodding, because that's really where we as the school board are going to have our tough time is coming up, actually.
Gloria?
Similar to Amy, we did the same thing in LISD, where we appointed a lot of that power to our superintendent, because we didn't know things were, especially when this first started, this COVID-19 and quarantine, we had new information every day, right? I mean, everything was changing, and we needed our superintendent and administration to be able to act without trying to achieve a quorum. And we didn't know if everyone was going to be able to get online, everyone was going to get connected. What if somebody got sick? So we wanted to make sure our superintendent could make the decisions he needed to take care of our, our school district. We're all concerned about the budget now. There's a lot of unknowns. Making plans for next year, and some of that is set for next year, but at the same time, you don't know what's going to happen the year after that. LISD, we are a fast growth district, and we were set to open a school every year for the next 10 years. And so as we're planning to open schools, these are schools that are opening and that are planned to open not based on future projections of growth, but overcrowding that exists right now. Wow. So we need to open those schools. We need to get those schools, but at the same time, that's hiring a lot of staff, and then you worry about your budget and the process. Just having to make plans on so many unknowns is frightening.
That is tough. One of the conversations that we often have at the Austin City Council, and it's often focused on AISD, and I'm constantly reminding folks about our other school districts. And in fact, in the city, there are many other school districts besides AISD, but Leander and Round Rock schools are part of District 6, or the vast majority of District 6 is Leander and Round Rock schools. One of the questions is how this is impacting some of our more vulnerable students and their families. I know a lot of folks rely on schools for meals even. What are you all hearing? Amy, your Title I schools are in District 6. Gloria, I know Leander has some Title I schools, but they're in other parts of the school district. But what are you all hearing, and what programs have started to roll out to help those families?
Well, I know we are doing the meals every day. We have meals for our students between 11 and 1, and Forest North Elementary is one of our pickups. Anderson Mill Elementary is one of our pickups here in District 6. And it's, lunch and then breakfast for the next day. We also have, on Fridays, they get a kit to take home so that they have meals for the weekends. We did do our Chromebook rollout, and right now we're doing hotspots where they're working with the principals and counselors to go out and get internet hotspots to people who don't have them, because that obviously is, a real, for kids that don't have access. We did have paper copies. We still have paper copies. I actually am a paper person, but we are trying to get the hotspots out. We got a shipment of 500, 460 have been put out now. We've got another shipment of 500 coming in today or Monday that are going to go out to those families. And hopefully, right now, I think we have between 2 and 5% of our kids, depending on what area they live in, that we haven't really made contact with. I know our staff is desperately trying to get in contact with on a daily basis.
Wow.
Yeah, some areas it's like 2%, others it's up to 5% of the kids that, haven't logged in, haven't made any kind of contact. So counselors, teachers, principals, they're out, trying so hard to find those kids and families.
One of the things we are working with the technology and hotspots, making sure everyone has a device. With food, it's not just for students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. It's not just Title I. It's any student that needs to go get a meal can go get their breakfast and lunch. You have a lot of students, a lot of families that may not have qualified, and their financial situation looks very different right now than it did 6 months ago.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of students that need those meals. Counselors and our administration is also working with students and families that cannot get to the campus to get the meal. They're working individually with them to make sure that anyone who needs food, that we can get food to them. Also working with different local organizations, work closely with Hope Country Community Ministries, making sure that they also have food for dinner and on weekends. But I think that vulnerable population is a real concern in terms of access to content, access to food, and access to curriculum. Like Amy was saying, losing contact with students. I worry about the academic gap that we're seeing now, and what this is going to do to us in a year. How we're going to see this come fall, that academic gap. You have students who are working, their parents are working, and their primary, provider for all their siblings right now. So they're not able to log on. They're not able to access content. So it is a real concern that I know school districts are already thinking about and already planning for come fall, what that academic achievement gap is going to look like and how to take care of those students.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I would piggyback on that. We are actually doing the same. It's statewide, I think, where we do have meals for families that weren't free and reduced prior. And yeah, it is tough trying to make sure that achievement gap, because we even have some of our students that are low, that are actually going back to work to support their families now, when the parents have been laid off and the students have gone to go get jobs. And then they're trying to do their homework in the evening. So it is tough.
The school closures have been really hard for a lot of families. I want to bring up something else that the Austin City Council was presented about kind of the longer term. I want to make sure I can zoom in so people can see what we're looking at. We were presented these charts at a council meeting earlier this week, which talk about the hospitalizations. That's the kind of wavy bar that happens in red, and the projected deaths that might occur in our community, which is the darker line. And there's a lot of kind of variables that go into this. But for you all, there's a real difference in what happens in the fall semester, depending on the actions we take today. And you can see that first chart is kind of a best case scenario. And it's really kind of gross to talk about 2,900 deaths as a best case scenario, but that is the crisis that we're in right now. But it includes a second lockdown over the summer, which seems somewhat inevitable. Every pandemic has a second spike. We'll talk more with Dr. Gandhi about that. But what's scary for me and for the schools is that second chart. If we don't do as good a job as we can, mostly protecting our most vulnerable folks, seniors, folks with medical conditions, we're going to find ourselves opening, closing the schools into the fall, spring, and into next summer. How are y'all being? Are you in conversations preparing for this type of disruption beyond just the next couple of months?
I will say in Round Rock, we've just started that. I will say we, as in the board, has just started that with the administration. I know they have been planning more than that we've had the conversation so far, but there are phases that they're coming up with how we're going to handle it over the summer, an 8-week, hopefully try to work with kids over the summer if there's no day camps, depending on what happens there, if we go back and then have to stop again in October. We are just now in sort of that planning process, and how that's going to work for teachers, what support we can give to teachers. I think it's going to come back to our budget discussion too, that unfortunately we have to have we've got to do our budget by June, but we're not going to actually know what's coming down the pike until a little bit later. So we really are going to have to plan for all those different scenarios and how to best support our kids and our teachers if we do go in and out and in and out. And hopefully everybody, I was at HEB today and everybody still had their mask on, so I was really glad at our HEB, Jimmy. And so I was glad to see that, and I hope everybody does keep going, because I am in quarantine fatigue personally. I want us to be really good for just a little while longer, and then hopefully kind of come out of this, because I need to see people again.
That's right.
Yep, our district's doing the same. Our administration worked on what this quarantine and COVID-19 curriculum looks like in terms of phases. And, is that phase 1, phase 2, and then moving forward, being able to have some type of system in place to where if we did have to close, if we did have to go back to something like this, we would be better prepared for it. So I think a lot of our school districts are preparing and having all those options available. But of course, everything's tied to budget, and being able to support those different options financially is concerning.
Well, thank you all so much for taking the time to join the show today. It has been really helpful and valuable to have such great partners between the city of Austin and your school districts in both of you and some of your other fellow board members that I have the pleasure of working with. It is a very different reality to have friends who really care about their communities like you all do. It's a very different experience than I had the first couple of years I was on the council. So thank you all so much for all you're doing on the school boards and for your communities. And if you want to stick around to the end, we'll bring you back up at the end of the show.
Thank you.
All right. That was really good. The school question is a really tough one, and it is the one that city councils generally don't get too involved in, the questions about the schools. But you will find items on the city council agenda related to that as well now, because just about how we're marshaling resources together to address this crisis. But let's take at least a little bit of a break of that on that while we talk about some music. Let's bring up our musician for the week, Loulou Ghelichkhani. Did I get it better that time?
Yes, you did, council member.
I have my staff texting me behind the scenes. No, you pronounce it this way. So I got summarily corrected.
It's okay. I'm not phased. I'm used to it.
Yeah, Loulou, thank you so much for joining the show today and sharing your time and your music with us. First off, how are you holding up? How are you and your family doing during this time?
I mean, I'm a pretty positive person. I think if you get to know me, you know that I try to look at the best, situation, scenario. I'm focusing on the silver lining. I get to spend more time with my family. I have a 19-year-old. I think if we weren't on lockdown, I wouldn't see her as much. And I think we take it a day at a time. We're a household of 2 musicians. And I used to supplement my income in the service industry. So financially, sure, it's pretty, we're in that unknown zone. We're just trying to stay focused. But otherwise, as far as our morale, we're strong, and we're just looking at the, trying to just stay positive and taking it a day at a time.
That's great. I'm glad that everybody is doing well so far and staying healthy. I want to talk about your career as a musician, but I'm also really interested in your origin story, you and your family's path that led you to Austin.
Sure.
Tell me more about where you come from.
And it's we'll just kind of make it a quick,
Yeah.
My family's Iranian. My parents were both athletes in Iran in the 60s and 70s. And we exiled during the Iranian Revolution to Paris. So I grew up in Paris. Even though I was born in California, because my dad, as a soccer player, had a short stint, was hired by the San Francisco earthquake team. So I popped out. I'm a US citizen. And then we went back to Iran and then exiled in Paris. So I grew up there. And then, my dad ran a magazine in Paris. And I think eventually my family decided to move to the States. And I moved here towards the end of high school to Washington, D.C. I moved to Austin as a musician about 7, almost 8 years ago.
That's such an amazing story and path to come to Austin. Although being in Austin for 7, 8 years, I think that makes you a local. I think that's
Thank you.
A native. You have that many years under your belt. I think you get to claim it. We're certainly claiming you as an Austinite, so I think I think that's fair play. So your music, I've come to understand is very popular. I've got a couple of photos to share that you sent my way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually Night Glitter. That's with my partner, John Michael Chef. We live together and we have a band called Night Glitter that we started in Austin. So that's us in our home studio, which is where I am right now. And that's our vinyl. And actually, this was our week for our vinyl release. We're supposed to play at the Mohawk on Saturday with Sir Woman and Friday the 13th. And, so we're stoked. This is our first musical baby together. It's our first vinyl. And it's out now.
Well, congratulations. That's really exciting. Are you, and I understand you participate in other groups. Night Glitter is with you and your partner, but you're also
Austin, my solo, like my band with my partner. But I've been with Thievery Corporation based out of DC for about 20 years.
Wow. That's awesome.
Thank you.
I've been able to interview or speak with a number of musicians through the show. And it's so interesting how everybody has a very different reality when it comes to their music, and it's just all very, very different that matches whatever you're able to pull together, I guess, or at least your talents. But you're also, you're definitely a working musician, but you're also working out of music to support your music, like a lot of Austinites do.
I think one of the things I always say is like, I never thought that in my lifetime I'd actually be unemployed. I want to do like this, but it's actually not in quotation. I just never thought in my lifetime, because I'm just such a hard worker. I've always supplemented my income. I think that if I felt like I wasn't touring enough, being a single parent for years, I always supplemented my income as a bartender or working in the service industry. I definitely feel like Justine's is one of my homes in Austin. And it's been just kind of strange to not be able to do either.
Yeah, it's kind of a double whammy for a lot of musicians. Both their ability to play live and their side gigs are both being dramatically affected. Yeah. Well, thank you again for joining the show. And I understand that you have a song that you're going to perform from.
It's going to be in French, and I'm going to try to just kind of do a solo performance without the band for you guys.
That's great. Let's can't wait to hear it.
Thank you. Quand tu regardes à travers tous les nuages, ils se bousculent, ils te touchent, et toi tu t'emmerdes. J'ai besoin de partir d'ici, aller où s'en va. J'ai besoin de partir d'ici, aller où s'en va. Mesdames et messieurs, allez, une longue pilule pour s'échapper, pour tout oublier. Mesdames et messieurs, allez, une longue pilule pour s'échapper, pour tout oublier. Ils ont tué cette planète. Ils ont plus de regret. Ils ont tué cette planète. Ils ont plus de repos. J'ai besoin de partir d'ici, aller où s'en va. J'ai besoin de partir d'ici, aller où s'en va. I did a little short version.
That was awesome and so beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much,
Definitely
Loulou.
missed my drummer and having to replace him. We've been replacing him with a lot of old drum machines. So Josh, believe we're thinking about you.
Oh, that's we're all trying to make do with what we can.
Yeah.
Thanks, Loulou. Thanks for sharing your story and for sharing your music.
Of course.
on
Thank
the-
you for having me.
Thank you. Stick around. We'll bring you back on right after we talk to our last guest. Thanks, Loulou.
Sounds good.
We are way over on our time, y'all, and our last guest is really important and is doing some great work in the community. I want to jump right to him. Bring up Dr. Pritesh Gandhi. Dr. Gandhi, thank you for taking the time out to be on the show.
I'm happy to be here with you from my car.
From your car, stepping out from the clinic to talk to the public.
Absolutely. Yeah, I always, we're just right behind me is the health center where I work, and every day here has been just absolutely crazy. I think in real time we're seeing the effects of when we talk about contact tracing, we talk about doing swab. We feel that here, of course, at the health center where I work.
I can't possibly imagine what you must be experiencing being a physician on the front lines of this crisis. You know, the governor is telling businesses they can reopen, but when I look at the data, I am not seeing that the day has come. What are you seeing right there, live and in person with your community?
Sure. Yeah. So just by way of context, we serve here at the health center. I work at a federally qualified health center. We serve about 19,000 uninsured and underinsured Central Texans. And so we serve a pretty large region. And these are folks that struggle with basic access to healthcare, and then all of the other things that come with living in poverty, struggling with access to food and access to housing. And so what I would say is that contextually, we are just now starting to see the effects of doing enhanced testing. When this whole thing started a number of weeks ago, I could count the number of test kits that we had on a couple of hands. And so, like many health centers and many clinics, we had to really minimize the number of tests that we did, because we had to save them for the absolute sickest. They had to meet certain criteria. And if you were well enough to not have to go to the ER, or well enough to not have to see a doctor, then you probably stayed home. And so we're just now starting to get our hands on more test kits. But again, you know, for a clinic like ours, where we see 19,000 Central Texans, we may have a couple of hundred test kits. And so there is still a significant delta in terms of testing that's available. It's not as if we can test every single person that is walking around. And unfortunately, this is what we're going to have to do, right? Like we are opening up for business today statewide, but the governor hasn't met even the recommendations of his own medical team, who is saying that we needed a couple of weeks of decreasing cases. We needed to ensure that that curve was not just flattening, but on the decline, and we're just not quite there yet. And so I think there is a mismatch between what is the perception of what is happening versus what we're seeing in real time. Not enough testing, not enough contact tracing, and therefore not enough isolation and suppression.
I think that's one of the challenges that's been in communicating back to the public. Is some folks have been concerned that there was no path out, that we were gonna have to stay in permanent lockdown for a year because that was the only thing to be done. But in reality, we might have been just a couple more weeks away from being in a place where we could start to safely reopen, because we'll have reached milestones in testing or capacity in tracing.
You are so right. I mean, part of this process is being able to meet the benchmarks that you put out, right? And we were making good progress, right? Part of the way to determine that is that what is the relative percentage of the tests that you're doing that are coming back positive? When we first started, even at a clinic like ours, it was a relatively high percentage. And you were seeing this across the country. 20% of all tests done were positive. 25% of all tests done were positive. And over the ensuing weeks, that number has gone down, presumably because you're testing a much wider swath of the population. So we were making appropriate progress. And I think the governor here just took a step a little too soon. And unfortunately, it's going to take us a few weeks to determine what the effects of that are, right? I mean, today is the first day of easing back into our economic activity. Now, knowing that the incubation period can last up to a couple of weeks, and we may not see the effects of this for 2 to 3 weeks. And by then, we may have already dug ourselves back into a little bit of a hole. So I remain hopeful that folks continue to practice social distancing, that folks wear masks when they're out in public. I have my mask right here, which I will be putting back on when I go inside my clinic, because I follow the rules. I think you would have seen, I'm sure, the vice president who made a tour of the Mayo Clinic and didn't have his mask on. I mean, I take a second and just communicate the slap in the face that is to healthcare workers on the front line, to patients, to those of us that are putting it all out there to keep people safe. And the vice president, I think, from a position of insecurity and machismo, decides that he needs to walk into a hospital without a mask on. It was beyond the pale. But I think we're on I think that there are things that we can do. I think the jury's out on the direction that we're going.
Insecurity and machismo seems to be the order of the day up in DC. But you're also trying to get to DC.
Yeah.
You are running for Congress in the 10th district, one of the gerrymandered districts, I think it's fair to say. It stretches from Austin to Houston. Yeah. And you're in a runoff. Is that right? You're in the runoff?
That's right. That's exactly right. We just went through a really tough primary. It was very competitive. We started this campaign last March, and so we have been in this race for a long time. And this is just for folks of yours that are tuning in for the first time. This is a district that runs from Northwest Austin due east all the way to Houston, to Katy, Tomball, and Cypress. It is a profoundly gerrymandered district. but one that is in the reach of the Democratic Party. Look, when we announced this race last March, people were hungry for, even at that time, science-based, data-driven leadership, leadership that reflects the stories of ordinary people. And I think that for me, after a career spent in advocacy and fighting on the front lines, whether it is organizing the largest protests of doctors and scientists in the country at the border in Tornillo when they were separating families a couple of summers ago, or fighting for choice on the steps of the Capitol, or testifying on paid sick leave. I've been fighting these battles for almost 15 years now. And I think that when you were in exam rooms, I always tell people that a few years ago, I think the president had just been inaugurated. I remember starting to see patients of mine, young kids, who were coming to the clinic by themselves because their parents were afraid to take public transportation. Their parents were afraid to drive their car. They were afraid of being pulled over and being deported. And the look and feel of trauma with these children it was too much to bear. And we had to tell that story. And so this campaign is about telling the story of those that are vulnerable, telling the American story, and of reclaiming what this country means to me and what it means to so many others, particularly me as a first-generation son of immigrants. My mother's from East Africa, and as is my father. And I was born right here in Houston, and we have to fight for these shared values. And so that's what this campaign's been about. It's been a competitive primary. We're in the runoff. I think folks are hungry for again, science and critical thinking in their leadership, and that's what we're going to bring to Washington.
Well, thank you, Dr. Gandhi. I don't want to take you away from your very critical work on the front lines of this pandemic, but thank you for stepping up to run for Congress. I know the runoff is a challenging effort. I was in a runoff myself back in 2014, so I know how challenging that can be. Hopefully, by the time we get into July, I'm sure you know the dates of the runoff election.
Yeah, I believe it's July 14th. So
July 14th. So. Hopefully, we're in a place where we're doing vote by mail. That's working its way through the courts right now too, and folks will be able to vote safely. And then perhaps we will both be on the ballot, at least in Northwest Austin, heading into November. Thank you, Dr. Gandhi, for all you're doing, both on the campaign trail and in your role at the clinic. I'm going to bring up all of our guests: Loulou, Amy, Gloria. Let me take that banner off there. Thanks everybody for joining the show. I want to do something I've not done before. I'm going to take a selfie. Right? I could see kind of everybody, get myself in there. All right, everybody wave. I love it. I love it. Thank you all, and all of the work you're doing, and Loulou, your music. Thank you for sharing that with us and the whole community today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What a great show. Another great show. 26 episodes in, no end in sight to the show. We're going to keep this going every single week. Everyone still, please, if you have the ability to stay home, do so. We are continuing to do new programs and new support. You can always follow along on my website, atxd6.org, where we're tracking our coronavirus issues and work. Also, the city's website, austintexas.gov/COVID-19, to see all of the city programs that are in place. A lot of stuff's going to get adopted on May 7th, so you'll see even more programs coming. We are all in this together. I know this community will pull through. We will find a way to do it, but only if we all continue to work together and do everything we can to keep each other safe in this crisis. It is a challenging time for everyone, and we're only going to get through it together. So thanks everyone for watching. Please like, share, subscribe on YouTube. It helps keep the message going stronger. And most importantly, in this time of crisis, if you can, stay safe, but stay home.